They thought they had Caroline Levitt cornered on live TV. But when the full truth came out, the tables turned. The cameras were already rolling, and the studio lights bore down on the panelists like a silent audience. Watching, waiting. A live political debate wasn't new for Caroline Levitt. She had been through enough of them to know how these things went. A little back and forth, some fiery exchanges, and at the end of it all, both sides walked away claiming victory. That's just how the game was played. She sat poised, wearing a confident smile, her hands folded neatly on the glass table as the host ran through introductions. It was a panel she had been on before, two conservatives, two liberals, and a moderator whose job was to keep things from going completely off the rails. To her left sat Rebecca Vaughan. Caroline had debated her a handful of times before. Rebecca was no amateur. She had been in the business for over 2 decades, carving out a reputation as a hard-hitting journalist who never shied away from controversy. She wasn't the loudest in the room, but she had a way of delivering her words with slow, calculated precision that made them land like a gut punch. But Caroline wasn't intimidated. She had gone head-to-head with stronger opponents and walked away unshaken. This was just another debate. And now, let's get into tonight's topic, the moderator said, looking directly into the camera. We've seen a wave of new reports surrounding former President Donald Trump, his influence, his legal battles, and whether or not he's still the dominant figure in conservative politics. Some say his grip is slipping. Others believe he's stronger than ever. Caroline, I want to start with you. Where do you stand on this? That was easy. Caroline straightened in her seat, her voice smooth and unwavering. Let's be honest. There's no conservative movement without Trump. The base isn't moving on from him because he's the only one fighting for them. The media has been trying to bury him for years, but every time they come up with a bombshell, it turns out to be a nothing burger. So no, I don't think his influence is fading. In fact, I think he's just getting started. The other conservative panelists nodded, while Rebecca remained still, her hands loosely clasped together. She had that look in her eye, like she was waiting for the right moment to strike. The moderator turned to her. Rebecca, you've covered Trump extensively for years. What's your take on that? Rebecca leaned slightly forward. I think it's easy to say Trump is still strong when you're looking at it from inside the bubble. But if we step outside of that, what we're seeing is a shift, one that many people aren't ready to admit. I've spoken to strategists, insiders, and even former supporters who say his influence isn't what it used to be. And that's not an opinion. It's backed by numbers. Look at the drop in endorsements. Look at the polling. Caroline scoffed. Polling? Really? Polls had Hillary Clinton winning in a landslide, and we all saw how that turned out. Rebecca didn't react. It's not just polling, Caroline. It's the lawsuits, the criminal investigations, the growing list of people turning their backs on him. At some point, you have to ask, how much of this is fake news and how much of it is reality? The conversation was heating up, but Caroline kept her cool. This wasn't her first rodeo. Every single time, people like you claim this is the end for Trump, and every single time, he comes back stronger. It's almost funny watching the media scramble to spin a new narrative when the last one doesn't stick. Rebecca smiled. It wasn't the kind of smile that signaled amusement. It was something else. Well, since we're talking about narratives, she said slowly, I have something to share tonight that isn't spin. It's something that, as a journalist, I felt a responsibility to bring forward. Because if we're going to talk about Trump's future, we have to talk about everything, not just what his supporters want to hear. She turned slightly, gesturing toward the control room behind the cameras. Caroline felt a flicker of something in her chest, a gut instinct. The air in the studio shifted just slightly, but enough to notice. Something was coming, but what Rebecca was about to reveal was nothing Caroline had prepared for. For a moment there was silence, not the kind that comes from a lull in conversation, but something heavier, a pause before impact. Rebecca Vaughan kept her eyes locked on Caroline as the control room responded to her signal. A large screen mounted behind them flickered, then changed. The panelists turned their heads slightly, the studio lights reflecting off the glass table as the image became clearer. At first it was just a document, a scanned copy of something official-looking, a court filing, an affidavit. Caroline squinted at the fine print, but before she could read any of it, Rebecca spoke. "This," she said, tapping a manicured finger against her notes, "is part of a sealed deposition from someone who worked closely with Trump's team. Someone who was there behind closed doors for conversations the public was never supposed to hear." The studio went still. Even the moderator, who had been carefully neutral up until now, adjusted in his seat. Caroline let out a sharp breath, forcing a chuckle. "Let me guess. Another anonymous source? Another disgruntled former employee looking for a book deal?" Rebecca didn't flinch. "Not anonymous, not disgruntled. Just someone who decided they didn't want to be part of the cover-up anymore." And then the screen changed again. This time it wasn't a document. It was a recording. A grainy security camera still taken inside what looked like a private meeting room. Caroline's chest tightened, but she didn't let it show. "This footage," Rebecca continued, her voice even, "was obtained legally through court filings. It was submitted as evidence in an ongoing case, one that, up until this point, the media hasn't had access to. But that changed this morning." The video started playing. The audio was slightly distorted, but the voices were unmistakable. A low, familiar drawl speaking in clipped sentences. "Trump." Caroline clenched her jaw, forcing herself to stay expressionless as the words cut through the silence. "I don't care how we do it. Make it disappear. Bury it. Do you understand me?" And then another voice, one less familiar, but clearly someone taking orders. "I'll handle it, sir. No paper trail." The clip ended abruptly. The screen went dark. For the first time since the debate started, Caroline had no words. The moderator cleared his throat. "Rebecca, what exactly are we looking at?" Rebecca turned to the camera, as if addressing not just the room, but the millions watching from home. "This is evidence from an ongoing legal case. A case involving payments, backroom deals, and the kind of conversations that are never supposed to see the light of day. And the person who submitted this, they were part of Trump's inner circle." Caroline felt a slow burn rise in her chest, but she kept her face calm. "This is ridiculous. You don't even have context for that clip. He could be talking about anything. It's a soundbite, and you know it." Rebecca tilted her head slightly. "If it's nothing, why was it sealed?" The studio was dead silent. Even the crew members behind the cameras weren't moving. Caroline gripped the edge of the table. "I'll tell you why. Because the media has been trying to pull the same trick for years, cutting up audio, twisting words, and feeding the public whatever narrative fits their agenda." Rebecca raised an eyebrow. "Are you saying it's fake?" Caroline inhaled slowly. She couldn't say that. Not directly. Because if she did, Rebecca would pull out the next card in her deck. A verification report, a legal stamp, something that would prove the clip wasn't doctored. Instead, she leaned forward, leveling her gaze at Rebecca. "I'm saying you're playing a dangerous game, and you know exactly what you're doing." Rebecca didn't look away. "I do. I'm telling the truth." Caroline turned to the moderator, her voice sharp now. "And are we just going to let this go unchecked? A so-called journalist dropping some half-baked evidence on live television without giving anyone a chance to verify it?" Rebecca leaned back in her chair. "By all means, verify it." Caroline clenched her jaw. This was a trap. Rebecca had come prepared. Every angle covered, every possible pushback anticipated. And Caroline knew exactly what was happening. This wasn't just a debate anymore. This was a takedown. But Caroline wasn't going down without a fight.